Love you, remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept the Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy might be complete. This is my commandment: love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends because I have told you everything that I have heard from my Father. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to go out and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give you. This I command you: love one another. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Love, 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 love. It seems that we hear this word over and over out in society and also here in the church. We hear that Bill loves Sue, and Sue loves Fred. It seems that every sitcom we hear people that are falling in and out of love. We hear about married people breaking up and we wonder what happened to their love. And then, like today, we come to church, and again, we hear more about love. But this love is not the same. The love that we hear in society and the love that Jesus was talking about, there's a difference. This true love is love that demands sacrifice. A choice must be made, and sacrifice must exist. It seems that people who fall in and out of love may not have made that choice to include sacrifice in their love, or at least one of the two have not. There's always a lot of talk when people are getting married, but sadly they don't seem to focus on Christ being part of that love relationship. It seems that they're more concerned with the backgrounds and with all of the surroundings of the event. Perhaps they're not ready for true love, sacrificial love. Perhaps they're not ready for that love that demands a choice, a decision. See, the love of Christ comes with a price. There is a sacrifice that we need to make in order to return Christ's love. And if we've been chosen to work for the kingdom, and by the way, according to today's gospel, we are chosen for this task, for it was not we who chose God, but rather God who chose us to go forth. So our options are limited. See, if we have put on that baptismal gown, part of Christ's body, if we put on that gown, we can no longer wear the clothes of a pagan. Now, this might be difficult to accept in our society, where we preach and we hear about endless choices, we hear about no limits and no rules. We have to come to that realization that because we have been chosen, we have rules to follow, and there are limits in our Christian lives. We have to deny our infantile fantasies or desires for the infinitely greater good of God's kingdom. So maybe some stories will help. A young boy about 14, 15 years of age, he gets his first job after school working with his grandfather in a little store. After a few months, his grandfather felt confident that the boy was able to handle the store for brief periods of time. The store was in a quiet neighborhood, and there weren't many people out and about in the afternoon. But during one of these times, the boy was alone at the store and was robbed, and the boy was shot to death. A few days later, the robbers, they were captured. It was the same day of the boy's funeral, and a news reporter interviewed the grandfather and told him that the police had caught the murderers. Then he asked him if he wanted the men to receive capital punishment. Well, the grandfather looked shocked at the question. He said, "I cannot wish that. He said, I am a Christian. I'm not permitted revenge. Christianity imposes limits." Or Mother Teresa was often asked why she spent so much time caring for people who were going to die anyway. Her answer was that she had no choice. She was committed to serving Jesus, and is committed to serving Jesus in the poorest of the poor. There's also the story of Princess Alice, the second daughter of Queen Victoria of England. The princess had married, and she had a child, a baby boy. When the child was 4, he came down with a terrible disease. Otherwise, then they called it black diphtheria. It was highly contagious, and there was no cure and no hope if you contracted the disease. The doctors and the nurses told the princess that she could no longer see her son, for her own health was frail. Well, one day she stood at the door and was listening to the conversation, and she heard the little boy ask the nurse, "Why doesn't Mommy hold me and kiss me anymore?" That was all that Princess Alice could bear to hear. She did what any loving mother would do. She ran to her son's bed. She hugged him and she kissed him. She had no choice. She had to show her love. He needed her and she needed him. And within weeks, she too came down with a sickness, and both were buried together. You see, the choice of love, true love, demands sacrifice, and it also demands that we accept limits on our lives and even pain and suffering in order to love as Jesus loved. Parents respond to their baby's cry in the middle of the night. They have no choice if they love their child. But again, that choice, it requires sacrifice. And that's the meaning of true love. Look at your moms and your dads. Look at the sacrifices that they make for each other. This is how they make love to each other. In a true marriage, the marital love is infinitely more than the physical expression of love. Or a teenager who listens to a friend's story of family difficulties. The other teen needs an ear that understands. But the first teen would probably much rather be listening to music or playing video games or being out with his friends. But he has no choice but to be present for that suffering friend. Christianity demands it. A retiree who spends a few hours each day with an elderly neighbor, he'd probably rather be fishing or golfing, but he has no choice but to visit Christ's presence in the homebound. Christianity demands it. Or an auto mechanic who stays late repairing a traveling family's car that seems to have problems, and he works after hours. He would rather be with his own family, but as a Christian, he serves those in need. Christianity demands it. And on, there's many little daily routines that require sacrifice, and it's through these sacrifices that life is truly lived. Love, that true love of Jesus, imposes limits upon us. Love is sacrificial. When we look at the cross and we realize that we have been chosen, we've been chosen to lead, and we've been chosen to make a life difference in our lives as we are called to love others. One final story. It's just a story. You won't find this in Scripture, but I think it gets the point across. It's a story of how the devil attempted to sneak into heaven. And the legend goes that just before dawn on Easter Sunday, the devil dressed up as the risen Lord. He and his fallen angels accompanied him, all dressed as angels of light. As they approached the gates of heaven, he and his mob cried out in the words of Psalm 24 that says, "Lift up your heads, O gates of heaven, rise up, you ancient portals, that the King of glory might enter." Now the real angels were looking down upon whom they thought was their king returning from the triumph of the dead, and so they shouted back, "Who is the King of glory?" The devil then made a fatal mistake. He opened his arms, he spread his palms, and he declared, "I am the King of glory." Immediately the angels slammed shut the gates of heaven. They knew that it was not the Lord. Do you know how they knew? See, when he raised his hands, there were no nail marks. There were no marks of nails in his palms. He had no wounds of love. He was obviously an imposter. To put it very simply, if we've been chosen by Christ, and we have, then we are to accept his way of life, the way of limits, the way of sacrificial love.
Once again, profess our faith and love in God as we say, I believe in one God, the